Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 1 of How to Play Vietnam, 1965 to 1975. I'll be doing a series of episodes that tell you how to play Vietnam, this excellent game from Victory Games, released in 1984. I want to give a shout out to the gentleman who requested this many years ago. His name escapes me, but he has the foghorn leghorn icon on his BGG, attached to his BGG account. Now, I intend to cover the battle for South Vietnam, 1965 to 1975. That is the primary scenario of this game. Most of the other scenarios would be designed just for practice to get you ready for the big one. The big one takes many hours, many days, many years, depending on how long, or it can take really a short time if South Vietnam falls quickly, but that's not the idea. Okay, on to the next step. Let's start with the victory conditions. There are two ways to win this scenario as the NLF. So the NLF is the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, the Vietnamese communist guerrillas. So I'm going to zoom in here. What we're looking at in the center of the screen is Saigon. So condition number 1 to win the game is the NLF player, National Liberation Front player, captures Saigon. If the National Liberation player captures Saigon, that means they have a piece there and the free world does not. Free world being the free world allies like Australia, Thailand, or the US, or the South Vietnamese. ARVN has no piece there, and the NLF does have a piece there. They win instantly. The game ends. That is one way to win. The other way to win is a little more nebulous. So let's take a province, for example, and take a look at it. So I'm going to look at Din Thuong here. So Din Thuong is this province here, and the province doesn't completely line up. They don't always completely line up to the standard provinces on the military maps, but these are the provinces for the game. So if the NLF player controls greater than 200 population in South Vietnam, then they win the game. So how do you know whether the Viet Cong have accrued more than 200 controlled population? Well, you're going to have a population control sheet that looks something like this. Now, we talked about Din Thuong earlier, right? So here's Din Thuong. Now, at the beginning of the game, the South Vietnamese control 6 population. If you look over here, there's a total of 9 population that live there. So 6 out of 9. So that means the NLF control 3 population there. Now, generally, on these sheets, you record. You can see how the war has progressed. The population of Din Thuong has mostly been becoming more loyal to the South Vietnamese government as time has gone on in the game that I'm playing right now. So, how does that occur? Well, let me back up a little bit. There's 360 total population on the map. And some of them are not represented in these provinces here. Some of them are represented abstractly. The province of Gia Dinh and Saigon are permanently loyal to the South Vietnamese government, and the city of Da Nang, which is not shown on the map here, is permanently loyal to the South Vietnamese government, and there's a certain amount of population. So if you add up all of the provinces, you're not going to come up with 360. However, when you add up each of the numbers in this column, it shows you how much population control is controlled by the South Vietnamese government. You add those numbers up, you get a number, and you take 360 and you subtract that number and you subtract the permanent population of Gia Dinh and Da Nang, and you get the number of NLF controlled population. The number is 70. 70 is how much population is permanently controlled by the South Vietnamese government, represented by Gia Dinh, Saigon, and Da Nang. So you total each column, you total the column, that shows how many South Vietnamese controlled population there are in the provinces. These are the provinces. You add 70 to that, that's how many the South Vietnamese government controls. Then you take that number and you subtract it from 360. That's how many the NLF controls. Typically during the game, you can see at the bottom of the sheet here, we just keep track of the delta. We don't keep track of, no, that's not the Mekong delta. That is the delta as in change. We keep track of the change in population. You're going to record that on these sheets, and these sheets will tell you. This is a sheet downloaded from the internet. This isn't the sheet that comes with the game. You can see here on the end of the tent offensive, I have 107 population controlled for the NLF. It's a far cry from 200. And we started the game at 143. So how do you affect the control of the provinces? Let's go back to Dinh Thuong. So the blue units here are NLF units, Viet Cong units to be specific. The yellow is ARVN, and the green is American forces. So the American forces and the ARVN artillery are sitting on the capital here of Mai To, the capital of Dinh Thuong. So if the NLF captures the capital, usually you leave your pieces, usually you guard each capital. If they capture the capital, that's going to knock down the modifiers for the pacification. If they're sitting here in cultivated hexes like they are now, that's going to knock down the modifiers for pacification. And the best that the South Vietnamese government can do is 0 modifiers. So all the modifiers are negative. So these are negative right now. So during the season, you're going to want to try and sweep these guys off the map, preferably, and out of the province of Dinh Thuong, if you would like the loyalty to improve there. And with no with no NLF presence, the province will eventually become more and more loyal over a period of time. There may be hiccups along the line, but they'll generally become more loyal. On to setup. Step 1 is to put 2 Marine regiments in Da Nang. Step 2 is to fill in a portion of the U.S. record sheet. We're going to set the South Vietnamese draft level, the South Vietnamese population controlled, and the supplies available. You're going to be using the supplies available immediately during this step to purchase and place units on the map. So if you don't want to lose the game right away, you want to put somebody in Saigon. And then it's a good idea to take all of these provincial capitals, all the red ones, and put some Vietnamese units in them. Now, the importance of placing the Vietnamese units is that, for example, if you leave this empty, like if you don't put a South Vietnamese troop in Phu Vinh, then the NLF can put troops in Phu Vinh. Now the U.S. will be able to purchase and place units at these port symbols, but they won't be able to place them in Phu Vinh. They're going to have to arrive, unpack, get off the ships, and then drive over here. So it's important that these be garrisoned by the South Vietnamese. That's just a little strategy tip. And it's an obvious strategy tip once you've played, but when you're first going at this game, this is a useful tip. South Vietnamese troops are purchased using supply points and population available. Every time you purchase a South Vietnamese unit, your draft level goes up, and every time you purchase a South Vietnamese unit, your supplies available go down. So at the beginning of the game, you're given an allotment, and you just spread the Vietnamese troops throughout the board. So this is our current game. This is the South Vietnamese leader display. The next step is going to be to populate the South Vietnamese leader display. You're going to pick one 3-star leader. Like, for example, right now, General Thieu is the 3-star leader. He's the president of South Vietnam, is what that means. And then you have your core leaders here. You're going to draw one leader for each corps. And then over here are the divisions. So if you don't purchase any element of a division, so like let's say, for example, you don't purchase any element of the first division as part of your initial purchase, then you don't draw a leader for it. You're going to draw a leader, you're going to roll some dice, and it's going to tell you where to put them. Where to put them on the track, that is. So you identify the column, and the die roll is going to identify the row. And that row is going to indicate their loyalty. As a side note, the black markers we're using there identify whether the division is effective or not. That is something that you will have to deal with later in the game, is South Vietnamese formations don't always do what you want them to do. So next is some more bookkeeping. This is where we keep track of how many, airplanes are available, how many riverines are available, how many helicopters are available, and these types of things. And so we have bookkeeping there. And then, trying to flip the page here. We'll be filling in our population control sheet. And they tell you at the beginning of the campaign what the values are that go in each of these rows. Sorry, that went upside down for a moment. This is the support track. This is where we're going to keep track of how many helicopters, how many air points we have, how many replacement points we have. But we don't really need to indicate where these markers go just yet. That's part of the beginning of the game, when we start the game. Initially, we're just logging we're just going to log it in our record book, and then on that record sheet, and then we add them to the display later on. So the next thing that's going to happen is the North Vietnamese player is going to record their starting allotment, starting commitment, starting morale, etc., etc. And then they're allowed to place one full unaugmented division. That means basic division, which will be 3 regiments and HQ, anywhere in North Vietnam or Laos, but not on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. This is the Ho Chi Minh Trail right here. So North Vietnam, Laos. Laos goes all the way down to, okay, well, the map doesn't go all the way down. I haven't unfolded it to the point where it gets to Cambodia, but you'll see the Cambodian border down there somewhere. So filling in that sheet, then deploying the North Vietnamese division. Next step is the VC. So the VC can purchase units based on supplies available and personnel available. Their purchases are very similar to the South Vietnamese in that you have to spend supplies and you have to spend personnel in order to put units on the map. Now, when the Viet Cong place units on the map, they can pick any unoccupied hexes anywhere on the map and put guys down. This is the importance of putting down South Vietnamese units. Like, you wouldn't want the Viet Cong to start the game with control of Hue, for example. So putting even a South Vietnamese, artillery battalion or reconnaissance battalion is enough to keep them from deploying there. So the Viet Cong get to deploy anywhere on the map. Now, this happens before the Americans get to deploy. So the Americans have their 2 Marine regiments in Da Nang already, but there are no other American units on the map at the beginning of the game. So if you don't have time to play the full campaign of Vietnam, then I recommend that you don't put a South Vietnamese unit there, because the NLF can just deploy there and then the game will be over before it starts. So that, of course, isn't just, that's not how you want to play the game, but it is possible to be really quick just by making a little mistake like that, or leaving it undefended at some other point in the game. So I want to emphasize that you want to never lose Saigon. Now, I didn't talk about how the Americans win. I talked about how the NLF wins. If you make it to the spring of 1975 and the NLF have not accomplished their victory conditions, then the Free World Allies, Americans and South Vietnamese, win. So now that all the pieces are set up, we start the game. This, of course, isn't a legal starting position for the game. This is a game in progress. This is more like what it might look like at the beginning of the game, with maybe some Viet Cong scattered around the area. So don't fret. The first thing that happens before the shooting starts is that each side gets to deploy new units. At the beginning of the game, we get to ignore certain rules when putting new units down on the board. So this is your opportunity to ignore certain rules when placing units down on the map. After which, we're going to start the game with the recruitment and those types of phases where you get to put new units on the map. But I'm going to save that for later. That's all for the victory conditions and setup. Next time we'll talk about purchasing units. Bye-bye.